Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. Let's talk about the Steam curation problem, shall we? And let's address some misconceptions that some people seem to be having with it. Firstly, let's establish what appears to be a fact, that Steam has opened the floodgates fairly recently to a lot of older titles and is not executing quality control in the same way that it used to. The green light system seems to be circumvented on a very regular basis, and existing publishers are being given free rein to dump their back catalogs on Steam, which they more often than not do all at once, flooding the front page with a bunch of very old games. Gabe Newell recently did an AMA in which he stated that Steam was moving towards a self-publishing system and away from Greenlight, and we've known that they've been moving away from Greenlight for a while, but they're still using it to approve 75 to 100 titles at a time to go on the Steam store based apparently on votes, although I can't imagine how many people still use the Greenlight system enough to justify verifying 75 to 100 titles at a time. That certainly seems unlikely to be truly representative of the user base of Steam, and the numbers are shrouded in mystery, which is very common with Valve, who don't like people sharing figures. So right now it means we have this unholy monstrosity of a system, which really isn't much of a system at all when it comes to publishing on Steam. You can get in via Greenlight, you can get in via a publisher, or if you're a publisher, you can dump all your old titles onto Steam without very much quality control whatsoever. What has that resulted in? A large flood of shovelware. There are plenty of examples of that. Recently, I showed a game called Desert Gunner, which is irredeemably awful and was published through Strategy First, but was a game that was actually released in 2006 and has no business being on the service. Strategy First has dumped a number of titles on very recently, including Dwarfs, Us and Them, Orb, and Clans, a game so broken that, in fact, you need to burn a CD in order to get the game audio. They made no effort to fix that for modern systems. I indeed would be surprised if the rest of the game worked as well. They are certainly not the only publisher to be doing this by any stretch of the imagination, and what it is causing is a wealth of absolute tat to end up on the Steam store. Now, here's the misconception. That doesn't matter, because Steam should not be doing quality control, they should not be curating. Well, here's the thing, they didn't believe that in the past, and as a direct result, getting on Steam was certainly required, I feel, to being successful. The thing is, it's still required, it's a lot easier to get on Steam, but it's less of a boost to any game that does. Now, why am I saying that? Well, the new releases section on the front page is actually extremely valuable. It's basically a storefront. That's where you're going to have the highest amount of visibility. Now, you might say, TotalBiscuit, you're talking out of your arse. The front page is not even remotely as important as you claim it is, and you are blowing things up completely out of proportion. I thought you might say that, so I decided to ask some actual developers, who of course have access to this information and know exactly what kind of effect it would have on their sales. This one is from Mel Kirk. He is a manager over at Zen Studios, the developers of things like Star Wars Pinball and Castle Storm. He says, being on the front of the new release list or any type of visibility on the storefront is extremely valuable, and yes, we always see a lift in sales when we are in this position. There is no doubt you will see better sales when you are in these key positions. Or perhaps we can have the opinion of Cliff Harris, the developer of games such as Democracy 3 and Gratuitous Space Battles. Being on the front page makes a massive difference, but I think that difference is skewed slightly depending on what marketing you do. If you do nothing, like most indies, then front page placement is life or death. If you actually have a marketing campaign and good word of mouth, and are an established dev with a mailing list, etc., then it's definitely less of a big deal, although still something that is always welcome. Front page placement also cannot compensate for a bad game. Poor reviews and bad word of mouth will easily overcome the front page benefits. Interesting points made there, in particular saying that, hey, if you're a bad game, then your space on the front page is effectively a complete waste, and would be better given to somebody else that can actually make some positive use out of it. Now, at the top of the page, as you're probably aware, you will see that there are various games on a slide system. It starts with Banished, followed by Warlock 2 the Exile for pre-purchase, Early Access for Rust, Train Simulator, Influent, which is actually a language app, the free-to-play documentary, South Park The Stick of Truth, and so on and so forth. What exactly determines is up there? Well, that, I suppose, is kind of a mystery, and one assumes that it is determined by Valve attempting to kind of curate in some way and putting up recommendations. At least we think they're recommendations, but Valve has never fully endorsed them, so who actually knows why they are the way they are, particularly considering that Rome is up there right now, which, as you're well aware, is an extremely buggy title. It may very well be a promotional deal. It may be that they want to put it up there because a publisher pays them to do it. That's possible. But of course, there's no proof of that. Or it could simply be that there is DLC on the way for Total War 2, so they're wanting to promote the pre-order of said DLC via the top of the page there. We don't know. We have no idea. But what we can say for certain is the new release section is full of absolute tat. Allow me to demonstrate. So you're going to see on the screen right now the new release section. However, we've added a few bits. We've decided to put in the information about when the game was originally released. And I feel this is very pertinent, because if you put something on your new release section, and yet it is not in fact a new release, I believe that's inherently misleading. Now you might say, well, it's new to Steam. That's not relevant. I could not give a toss. If this game was available anywhere else, then it's not a new release. It's really as simple as that. Now, a while ago, you could have made the argument that it's entirely valid to say, well, this is the Steam release, so there you go, there's a bit of front page promotion for you. That would have been valid a long time ago when it was hard to get on Steam. It is no longer difficult to get on Steam. So I believe that there should either be a cutoff for the front page, or that there should be a clear display of when the game actually came out in the first place. So look at this. Little Devil came out in 1993. 1993. It is 20 years old. And yet it just popped up under new releases and forced games like Luftrausers that's actually a new game further down that new release list. Indeed, that game, having only come out a few days ago, is now on the second page. That never used to be the case. Things got pushed off the front page a heck of a lot slower. And especially since they gave you a toggle for show downloadable content. Now, what's that other toggle over there? Well, you see, we did a little bit of a mock-up here, and this addresses one of the big concerns when it comes to content curation as far as I'm concerned, and I think that it's a nice little middle ground. From what I can tell, this problem actually seems to be localized specifically to PC digital distribution platforms. It doesn't happen on the App Store, it doesn't happen on Amazon, it doesn't happen on the PlayStation Store or Xbox Live Arcade. And of course, since it's the biggest provider for PC, it's also the biggest offender. Let's take the App Store, for instance. The App Store has, of course, hundreds of new games added every day, and as a direct result, the App Store curates a heck of a lot more. You can still find the new release section, and it will list every single game, but that's not what you get by default, and they curate the more popular titles. They give you charts down the side, which again is useful, and it's something that you also have on Steam. Admittedly, it's not so useful for finding newer titles more often than not. If you go to Steam right now, you'll probably see the top seller is whatever is on sale, and then it'll be whatever popular early access game like Daisy or Rust is up there, and so on and so forth. That list can be dominated by the same thing for weeks, but I like the notion of having a top-selling new releases list separate to that, and being one of the more useful ways to find new titles that are interesting. But here's what I think is a much better solution to all of that. I think that Steam should have all of that and then some. But I believe there should be a toggle right here for show-only brand new releases, right? So we put this in, we photoshopped this in, and this is what the front page would look like if this toggle existed. A hell of a lot cleaner, isn't it? And it would have been even cleaner if we'd done this a couple of days ago. As you probably saw on page 2, there was a massive dump of titles. Half the titles on page 2 were actually old, and were certainly not new releases whatsoever. But this has cleaned the list up a little bit, hasn't it? This looks an awful lot better. This seems like a much better way of doing things. After clicking that tab, I know for a fact that every game on that list is new, and most of them are pretty good as well, so that to me is far more useful, and as far as I'm concerned, that should be the default list. Now, to answer the argument that's definitely coming, you're going to say to me, A, this isn't fair, old games have value too, and they should be promoted as well. I agree. However, in the current environment, the vast majority of older titles being put onto Steam are not very good, because Steam has currently opened the floodgates for mass dumping of publisher back catalogs up to and including absolute, complete, and total shovelware. You know, I'd say that something like Desert Gunner is only one step above Big Rig's over-the-road racing. It is a complete and total mess with very little gameplay value involved in it whatsoever. But what about games like, say, Summoner? Now, that's a good game. That's, in my opinion, a bit of a cult classic. Well, let's use the slide system then. There we go. There's Summoner at the top of the list, and we even put in a little description there. Maybe they could just put that on the image, or they could put that below. The classic innovative fantasy RPG, now on Steam for the first time, you know. They could easily do that, and you might say, well, Valve shouldn't be curating. Guess what? They already are. That's what featured items is. They already do curate. They just only curate in a very specific way. So you can't really argue for a full-on Valve hands-off approach. And if you want to see the results of a full-on hands-off approach, you need to only go and look at the Xbox Live Indie section, a dumping ground of absolute, complete and total tosh with a very low barrier to entry. And thankfully, you can kind of get away with that. It's a shame that it's like that, but you can get away with it because it's not the main Xbox Live store page. If the Xbox Live store page was like Steam right now, it would be a goddamn disaster area. If Amazon was like the front page of Steam, it would be a damn disaster area. But this seems to be a problem that's mostly confined to the PC market. There's plenty of digital distributors on PC that have the same bloody problem. Although, at least with Green Man Gaming, they're a little bit more honest about it. We go to GMG, we see that towards the bottom, you've got new to GMG. Like, they don't claim it's a new game, they just say new to GMG, and they put Little Devil on there as well. That said, though, they've got their own bloody problems. They didn't look up the original release date, and if you click on the store page and scroll all the way down to the bottom, it claims that Little Devil came out in 2014, which is, of course, an absolute bloody lie. So GMG has its own problems in that regard. But let's be frank, Steam is the big daddy. It is the place where PC gaming happens. It is the place that matters. And as a result, I've said it many times before, and I'll say it again till I'm blue in the face, Steam has a responsibility. There's another counter-argument I hear come up, which, again, is a little bit short-sighted. Well, other stores allow terrible games to be stocked in their store. They shouldn't be doing quality control, so neither should Steam. Well, here's the thing. They do actually have quality control. Now, I worked at a game store for a number of years, and you know what we did every Wednesday? We did something called marketing, where we would go around the entire store and we'd be given a specific plan by corporate, and that involved rearranging the entire store every single week, and it would be doing so specifically based on what we wanted to sell. So, the new titles, the popular stuff, or really big sales, or just in general, games that were doing really well would be placed in prominent positions around the store. They would be at eye height. There would be multiple copies of them. You would do what was called facing up, which was you would put the popular titles so that the front cover would be seen. The back catalog, the less popular titles, they would generally be spine up so that they took less space. So we devoted more of the store space to those titles. Steam does this a little bit with the slide at the top, but nowhere near as much as a regular store would. Not only that, but a regular store would generally take those terrible games and they'd toss them in the bargain bin. They'd throw them in 3 for 10, 2 for 15, or whatever, and they'd put them towards the back of the store. They would not go out of their way to try and sell them. They are there for unsuspecting fools to stumble upon. They are not stuck in the storefront, which is exactly what Steam does, and there's the fundamental difference between the two. It is okay to stock terrible games. It's got to the point where Valve has decided Steam is opening the floodgates. Valve used to be overly restrictive and didn't allow in certain titles like Unepic or Space Pirates and Zombies. They had to struggle to get on Steam. That can definitely cause problems. But then they went entirely the other way. It's like they can't find a nice little middle ground there. But if they're going to put Shovelware on Steam, okay, but they need to give the tools to filter it out, and they certainly should not be encouraging people to buy it by putting it on the front page, because when you force a game off the front page, it simply gets less exposure. Is it fair that Cloud Built, which only just came out, actually has a decent amount of hype behind it, is almost off the front page because games like Dwarfs, a game that came out in 2008, Science Girls, a game that came out in 2009, but again, I'm not judging it. It may very well be a good game, but it is a little bit old now, and International Handball Challenge, which came out in 2011, are actually shoving it down off the new release list when Cloud Built is actually a new game. Does that sound reasonable to you in any way, shape, or form? Far as I'm concerned, it should not. And we should be seeing default filters available for that purpose. Keep those games off the default list. And if there is something particularly special, which Valve feels like they need to promote, and yes, they are doing that, so don't claim they're not curating already, then they can give it a slide. They can do whatever they wish there. But as it stands, the current Shovelware situation is a pain in the arse. It makes the store very difficult to navigate. It is quite literally hurting new and innovative titles because they're getting shoved off the front page a hell of a lot quicker. They're losing out on potential exposure, and this could be solved via the addition of feature sets and filters into Steam. And I know Valve's pretty slow when it comes to that kind of stuff, but again, You've got a responsibility. You're making a lot of money. You're in a very powerful position on the PC platform. And most of the time, we love you dearly. And we'll buy any silly hat you send our way. But your store is not up to snuff. My name's been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching. And I'll see you next time.